Welcome to Series 1, Episode 8 of the In Her Financial Shoes podcast. Welcome to the In Her Financial Shoes podcast with me, Catherine Morgan, founder of the Money Panel, helping you to get financially naked. Listen in each week where we talk about that taboo subject of money. Listen to brutally real life stories, step into our guest shoes and be left feeling 100% confident and in control. Oh, and we hate financial jargon, so don't expect any here. Small steps, big wins, let's go. Hi, and welcome to the podcast. So today we have an incredible guest called Karen Baines. Karen Baines is a conscious karmic creation coach. Now, I know, first of all, that's already going to fascinate many of you to introduce Karen today. But Karen is hugely passionate about helping entrepreneurs to reach a level of certainty to achieve the most that they can from their lives. And Karen and I really connected mainly because of her personal story and how she built her business so organically and so heart-centered. And she's really proved herself that it's possible to have abundance and to do exactly what you deserve. So welcome to the show, Karen. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Hi there. Hi, I'm really glad to be here. I'm absolutely thrilled and a little bit honoured, actually, that you asked me to join you. So thank you.
Oh, how lovely. That's a great start, isn't it? So, Karen, firstly, could you start with telling us a little bit more about yourself? What do you do?
Well, I'm a conscious karmic creation coach, as you said, and you said it so beautifully. So many people fluff it a little bit. So well done there. What do? I work with universal law. So what I like to think that I do is I work with entrepreneurs, mainly female entrepreneurs, although I do have a couple of males in my field at the moment. And what I do is I show those people how to leverage universal law within their businesses. We focus on money because money is obviously a very tangible thing. So there's so much to be gained in terms of knowledge and understanding of your own creational process. The signals that you get back from your bank account are incredible when you know what to look for. And I coach my clients on how to do that, essentially how to master their own experience when it comes to creating the lives and the businesses that they want. And normally what happens is when I start work with a client, it's because they've gotten to some sort of stage in their business where they feel like they're doing all of the right things, but nothing seems to be changing. So they've probably been at a certain income level for some time. And then the things that they used to be doing, maybe even the things that they used to enjoy doing, aren't necessarily working anymore. And as I said, there's so much information to be gotten from your bank account, from money. Money doesn't lie. You've either got it or you haven't. And if you haven't got it, there's a reason why you haven't got it. And it's leveraging universal law is one of the best ways that you can make sure that you're aligned to more money, more abundance, better relationships or whatever, because you can't pigeonhole energy, essentially. So when you focus on your business and you focus on money from a place of alignment, which is what I basically coach alignment, how to be more aligned, how to step into alignment, how to know that you're aligned, how to know when you're misaligned and what to do about it, so that it shows up in your bank account as more money, because actually that is the result of alignment. The money is a byproduct, if you like, of your own alignment. It's about stepping into your own personal gifts, living your passion, doing what you love. For most of my clients, they're coaches, healers, they're generally people that are in service to others. So it can be a bit of a minefield because there's a lot of overgiving can go on there, and that will show up in your bank account.
And I really want to kind of dig deep actually into some of those things that you've mentioned there, because I think certainly for female entrepreneurs, when you were talking about you get to this stage in your business where you're not progressing, you're not moving forward, and actually financially that's quite difficult for some people to move from building a business right up from scratch with just themselves to then suddenly being open and opening up their energy levels to, you know, to allow them to start thinking about bigger picture and becoming a bigger business and enabling them to earn, you know, and be, I guess, be open to deserving of earning more money. So, and I really want to kind of dig into some of that in today's interview. But what I also want to think about, first of all, Karen, is you talk there about how do you know when you're aligned or not aligned? So can you tell me a little bit about your own journey from the work that you did originally as a bookkeeper in your 20s and your 30s, and then how you built your business now? And what I want to start with is, what were some of the earliest experiences that you heard growing up with money?
The one that still haunts me. God bless my mother. I hope she doesn't hear it. But the one that still haunts me, my mother's mantra was, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. I must have heard that phrase easily like 5 times a day. Like it was just, I mean, I've got a younger brother and a younger sister. My mum was like brought us up on her own. My dad left when I was 4 years old. So we were in a position where mum was a one parent family. This is back in the 70s, early 80s. At one point she was holding down 3 different jobs to kind of literally just provide a very basic standard of living for us. So my early experience of money was really not cool. It was never around. I had this other version of it with extended family members. I have like part of my extended family, like my mum's sister, for example, all had sort of Oxford University degrees and things like that, and were in my aunt actually is retired now, but she was one of the first female priests, like reverends. So she had that kind of, that sort of like standing and the man, like more, I guess, a sort of a middle class energy type thing, if there is such a thing. That's kind of what my perception was. And at the same time, my father, when he left us, he remarried to somebody who I think she kind of had some sort of accounting background herself, and so money was always there for him.
Right.
And so there was almost like there was this big, what seemed to be a big divide. And like I say, we can't afford it, I can't afford it was something that I heard multiple times a day. And it's literally a phrase I have banned from my house. Like nobody's allowed to say that in my house. What do you say
as the alternative then? So if you are in a situation where you really can't afford to take them on holiday again this year, what sort of thing would you say?
Well, I mean, I can't really say from my own personal experience, because that isn't something that kind of happens so much now. But if anybody's listening, what I would say is find a way to put across to your children or whatever that you are in the process of creating. Because it doesn't mean it's not going to happen now. You know, in terms of vibrational shift around energy and money, there's a new income level, there's a new vibrational shift every 3 to 5 months. You'd be amazed what you can change in such a short space of time. And you are always in the process of creating something. And when you're doing that consciously, there's no limit. There's no limit to what you can create.
So I guess perhaps the conversation could be, you know, I can imagine my youngest saying, "Oh, mummy, I want a new football because my existing one's got a puncture," and I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, I've just bought a new football and he wants another one." So perhaps it could be using messages like, how much does that cost?
Exactly.
So think about, well, perhaps you could contribute some to it and then I'll contribute the rest, or, and I think that's really important, particularly with financial education, because when we are brought up with messages of, kind of almost like a lack of money rather than an abundance of money, then to use that, to reframe that, I guess, into more of a positive message that actually it is possible to do this. But, in current society, I mean, I'm petrified for my children because, with the likes of Instagram and social media and, we're thrown with these constant messages, aren't we, about consumerism and how we should be buying all this stuff in our lives.
Absolutely,
And,
yeah. It is.
We need to be mindful of that.
It is very important to basically teach your children to be responsible around money. But there's a big difference between being responsible and living in lack. A huge difference. And actually being, in terms of energy, if you like, money resonates to two energies before you spend it. When you spend it, you realign it. But it resonates at its own self to the energies of responsibility and power, and the responsibility part is so important. So one of the things that I get asked quite a lot, what's the first thing you can do when it comes to realignment to a higher income level, or opening up money channels if money's tight or whatever? What is the most important thing you can do? And one of the most important things you can do, and what I coach immediately out of the gate, is anywhere you're ignoring your money, stop it. The reason why that is so powerful is because energetically, when you're ignoring money, you're saying you don't want it around. What you're saying is like when you walk down the street and you see somebody coming towards you that you don't actually want to speak to for whatever reason, just having an off day. But you'll dive into the nearest store just so that you don't have to engage. We ignore what we don't want in our lives. So when we're not dealing with our money, I use the terminology when it's bossing us around, when it's the boss of our experience, when we're not dealing with it, when we're ignoring it, we're saying we don't want it in our lives. And what that actually looks like in terms of action is not looking at your bank accounts. That is one of the things that people do when they first begin to contract around money, or when they're afraid of money and they don't want to really know what's going on. Worst case scenario, burying their heads in the sand. That is exactly what they're doing. They're ignoring that money. They don't open their envelopes. They don't look at their statements. They don't want to look at the bank account, because every time they do, they feel bad.
Where does that fear come from?
I think it comes from, most people believe that they have no control over it. And if you think about money is how we assign value here in the human world. And I tell my folks, we assign value with money, and it also represents choice. Okay, so when we've got more money, we've got more choices, which is why it's so important in terms of conscious karmic creation. But first and foremost, it's how we assign value. So even if you think of your very basic needs, the roof over your head, your energy, your gas and electric, I'm talking about there, water, food, all those very basic needs, we pay for those. Because in our human world, the human society, that is how we show that we value something, by paying for it. Okay, so when we're contracted around money, when we're worried about money, when we're not looking at our bank accounts and we're ignoring money, that comes from that fear of not having enough, because we know that everything we need in our human world, I say everything, obviously not, I'm not talking about love and all of those things, but actually to a certain extent I am, because self-love and love for your, like, you know, the people that are in your immediate field, like your loved ones, your children, your partners, whatever, we, even at a very human basic level, one of the ways we value ourselves is by eating the correct food and having an environment where we can be supported and be nurtured. It's very difficult to do that if you haven't got a roof over your head and you haven't got any warmth and you haven't got any water and you haven't got any food. But all these things in the world that we live in require money. We have to exchange that value that adds to our lives with money.
In fact, we were talking about that on the podcast just this week. I recorded a very short podcast episode about how Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, and his pyramid, the famous psychologist who talked around that first step of creating security is about exactly what you've just said there, Karen, about making sure that your values align to what you're spending. And if your values are not aligning to what you're spending and your basic needs are not fulfilled, often what happens is people will use their credit cards, for example, and they'll try and go higher up the pyramids to get higher senses of love and relationships, and, you know, spending money on things that aren't necessarily basic needs. You know, they might go and buy a new car for £40,000 when actually their basic needs aren't being met. And so I think you're absolutely right. There's this synergy and connection between this scarcity, this mindset of scarcity, and how that can really affect how we feel about money. And you mentioned, Karen, earlier about how the relationship and the message that you had growing up with money was about, you know, we can't afford to do this. How did talk the listeners through, how did you go from hearing those messages growing up as a child to then going into the business that you initially created in your bookkeeping work, and then how that led to the work that you now do?
Very organically. So what happened as I was growing, I was actually a very unhappy child. I mean, like I said, my dad left when I was 4, and I felt really hard done by for a very, very, very long time. There was like a deep-seated need in me that just made me generally very unhappy. But at some level, I knew that it wasn't meant to be that way. And from a very early age, probably around about the age of 11, 12 years old, I started to see a counsellor. And so I was, like, from a very young age, I was like kind of doing the self-help thing. I started reading self-help books in my probably around about my mid to late teens, and I stopped reading fiction and started reading that sort of stuff. So that was always something that I was very aware of. When I met my husband, we still have very young children at the time. My youngest 4 were all under 5 years old, and he needed to start his own business. And at the time, we couldn't afford anybody to do his book work. So somebody put me in touch with an accountant who was absolutely amazing, and she came to visit me and set me up on an Excel spreadsheet to show me what I needed to do to keep my husband's accounts in order so that we could do the tax return. And it turned out, long story short, that I had a knack for bookkeeping, and she encouraged me to take it further. I mean, I'd left school with no qualifications, or I didn't even enjoy maths. It's a bit mad. I just didn't. But
me neither, by the way.
Yeah, isn't that funny? But she encouraged me to take my bookkeeping exams. Back then, it was still all manual. There wasn't even a software. Like, we didn't even have software. It was like, and I passed my bookkeeping exams, and she supported me in the early stages of that business. So I got some bookkeeping clients through her, and I got some for myself, and I started running my own business. And it got to the point where it was pretty successful. When I decided I wasn't kind of in alignment with it anymore, I was actually just at a stage where I was thinking I might need to take on some help. So So all the while that particular journey had been going on, I'd still been doing my, my self-development thing. And then around about 2012, I think it was 2011, 2012, the more spiritual side of it started to come in. And I had the light bulb moment when I discovered universal law. At the time, that was just the law of attraction. And for me, it was like, oh my God. I mean, I can remember now, it gives me goosebumps just when the light bulb that I had around that sudden new level of consciousness of this thing called universal law, particularly the law of attraction. So I kind of went down that road for a while. And whilst I was working with my bookkeeping clients, I realized that what I was actually doing was coaching them on why they weren't making any money. And it kind of went from there. And I realized that as much as I do love reconciling a bank, still to this day,
do mine for me then.
I still do my own and my husband's bookkeeping because I still love it. But I realized that what I loved more was showing people what was really going on.
Yeah.
And so I made the conscious decision that we would close down the bookkeeping and I would really focus on building up my coaching business. And that's what I did. And I haven't looked back.
So tell us more about the law of attraction, because I think for many people who perhaps haven't read any books or learned much about this, think that the law of attraction can be a little bit like, a bit woo-woo, a bit like wake, you hear people say, you just wake up in the morning and say to yourself, I'm going to have £1 million in my bank account tomorrow. And people, I think because of this lack of understanding, people think law of attraction, oh no, that's a pile of rubbish. So tell us more about what is the law of attraction, and also tell us about law of polarity, because I think that it's important to understand the two together, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so yes, you're right. I mean, I don't know if you see the stats of the people that listen to your stuff, but I'd be really interested to know how many people heard me mention the phrase law of attraction and just switched off. And actually, I have to confess that there's an element of that with myself too, especially now. The law of attraction is something that has taken the world by storm, certainly in my immediate field, and I'm kind of fed up with it as well, because it really isn't anything that's secret or anything that is, there's nothing magic about it. It's actually how we create. So the law of attraction in its simplest form states that like attracts like. And the way I coach my clients around it is that the universe can only say yes to everything that you choose. It wants you to have more. If you go back to even scripture and all of that stuff, which I'm no expert in at all, but what we reap, we sow. Ask and ye shall receive. It's all there in all of the different religions, all the different scriptures, all of the stuff, it's all there. But actually what it simply means is that like attracts like. The universe can only say yes. And what that means at an energetic level is, although we live in a very physical third dimensional world, we're obviously human beings. We make choices. Everything we do, we're choosing. Okay, even if you've got a current mindset of I'm not at choice around this, actually you are. Unless you've got a gun held to your head and your literal life is in danger right in that moment, you are at choice of every single thing you do. Your choices may be limited, but You are at choice. Now, energetically and universally, the world of energy, if you like, that doesn't happen at the third dimension. I'm no expert on quantum physics, but there are people out there that do understand what I'm saying. And most people will understand that everything has a vibration. Even the couch I'm sitting on, everything is energy, sort of molecules vibrating just at different speeds and all of that crazy science stuff. And the bottom line of it is that is how the universe, that's how we work. Although we work at a human third dimensional level, the choices that we make are of a vibration, and that's what the universe reads. So it's the way I translate that is it's the energy underneath the choices that you make. So if you make a choice and the energy underneath that is love or power or expansion or something like that, as in it's how it makes you feel. If it makes you feel powerful or it makes you feel like you're doing something out of love, that's the vibration that the universe reads, and it will bring you more opportunities to have more of that in your life. But likewise, if you're choosing energies such as obligation, resentment, guilt, sacrifice, and unfortunately, all of those energies really go hand in hand, and they're right up there, especially for women, mums, wives. You know, we just almost at default level somewhere in our psyche think that there's things we have to do and we must do and sacrifices that we have to make for our families, etc., etc., etc. But anything that's got any energy of obligation under it, if you're doing that, if you're doing obligation, you're still choosing it. And the universe then assumes that you must want it. Otherwise, why would you choose it? So then it can only say yes. So it says yes every time you choose obligation. Oh, she must love that. She wants more of it. Here you go. Because the universe doesn't understand negative and positive. Energetically, there's no negative and positive as we as human beings perceive negative and positive.
And I think what's really powerful about this, and I'm learning more about this just sitting here listening to you, Karen, but what you're saying actually is we don't have to be spiritual or religious.
No, absolutely not.
To believe in the universal law of attraction. And I mean, I'm just trying to think of examples in my life when things have happened. You know, when you hear yourself it's weird how this just happened at the right time, or
yeah.
Isn't it a coincidence that this has happened? Or, you know, for example, when I remember breaking up with my boyfriend when I was like 18 and I was devastated. And I remember walking around, I think I was in town or something, and all of a sudden I just kept seeing people in couples. Everyone was in relationships. And I remember feeling, you know, why is the universe rubbing this in my face? And actually, in reality, it was probably just my mindset that was seeking that, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the right word, but I was almost looking for someone that reassurance, or recognizing that was what was going on for me at that time. So I think the first thing that I think is really interesting is to bust this whole myth about law of attraction being about, you know, this woo-woo stuff that's only for spiritual people or religious people. And in reality, it's absolutely not. It is about what you were saying, Karen, about, you know, we all have a choice, and really choice is about control, and how we spend our money is entirely within our control. You know, we choose which house we live in, we choose which neighborhood we live in, of course, unless you're in a particularly particular situation where that's not in your control. But that's really, really interesting. So tell us a little bit about law of polarity and how that relates to the law of attraction.
Right. Well, the law of polarity, we kind of will have already led into it, because like I said, the universe, energetically, vibrationally speaking, the universe doesn't recognize positive or negative. So it just says yes to everything that you choose energetically, and it brings you more of it, right? As human beings, we perceive positive and negative, you know, right, wrong, good, bad, light, dark. Everything has its opposite. Everything. That's what the law of polarity states, that everything has its opposite. So when I'm working with clients, the main polarity pairing that I work with, or one of the main polarity pairings that I work with, is lack and abundance. And one doesn't exist without the other. You can't have an experience of abundance if you haven't known lack, and you can't have an experience of lack if you haven't known abundance. Now, it's important to understand that lack exists and abundance exists for everybody at whatever level they're at, which again is all about your vibration and where you are on that vibrational spectrum. But my version of lack is probably pretty bloody amazing for the guy who has got nowhere to live. His version of lack, like to that guy, a 10 pound is probably a huge amount of money. It's gonna feed him or whatever for the rest of the week. If he found that lying on the street or somebody donated that to him, that's an abundant week for him. For you or I, maybe we're in a position where £10 doesn't really go very far at all. It's not. So we've all got lack and abundance in our lives, not just monetarily. Like, it's the roof over your head, it's the relationships that you're in, it is the money in your bank account. It's also your skill set. It's also who you are and who you're becoming and who you were. So there's lack and abundance everywhere. And it's just recognizing that negative and positive isn't about a judgment. It's about one cannot exist without the other. But when you understand how to leverage that in your life or your business, then you can use that to kind of it helps you switch. You mentioned mindset. It helps you switch your mindset. What I do with my clients is we actually focus on lack. We focus on up-leveling the experience of lack. The abundance takes care of itself. When you focus on up-leveling your experience of lack without judgment, the abundance takes care of itself. That's how you leverage the law of polarity in your life and your business. But you have to understand that everything has its opposite. We have chosen to be human beings. This is our life. And the full human experience requires us to go through the full range of human emotion, both the negative and positive. Okay,
what sort of emotions do you hear from your clients that you work with when they're talking about being in those in that being in those, that scarcity or that lack and then going into abundance?
Well, I mean, obviously that, like, the main one that comes up for most people is fear. I mean, I think that's the very basic instinct in us. I mean, when we go right back to the original part of the conversation, when I said, you know, not looking at your bank account is like that contraction mindset where you don't want to look at your bank account, is actually driven by fear because you're afraid to look. So you avoid looking at it because you don't really want to feel the fear. So, but actually what people don't understand, unfortunately, when it comes to how we create and the process of conscious karmic creation, which is choice and consequence, by avoiding looking at the bank account because they're afraid to look at the bank account, or they're afraid to do whatever they need to do to get to the next level, however that shows up, they're still choosing fear. By avoiding it, they're still choosing it. And the universe can only respond with, yes, here you are, have some more reasons to be afraid.
It's really powerful, isn't it? I mean, 2 clients this week that I've coached, one a female and one a male, actually. So in a couple coaching session, and both of whom had very negative money messages growing up with money. One was because of a very narcissistic relationship with a parent, and that sort of control over their life for such a long period of time enabled him, he didn't give him his own control, because he constantly felt like any decision that he was making had to be, okayed by somebody else. And then the other message that the other client was hearing was around this lack and this abundance. And again, for her, she was petrified of opening up her bank statements, and it was piled up in her kitchen. And we've done some work together this week, and I gave her a task to do, and she sent me a photograph last night of all of her mail opens.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And she, and actually when she did the exercise, she didn't have that feeling of fear, because we identified where that was coming from, and actually proved to herself that she wasn't bad with money. And she kept telling herself, oh, well, I'm really bad with money. I don't manage money very well. And then we talked about, well, what things does she do that shows that she's good with money? And just a very small change in her thoughts of going from that, I guess in that situation, lack to abundance. Actually, I am good rather than I'm not very good, had a huge impact on how she now deals with money. And I think that often comes back to this whole piece, doesn't it, about being confident and in control of how we feel and the messages that we're telling ourselves and telling our children, for example. Karen, how did you get started from this being for you about personal development and understanding the relationship that you had personally when you were running your bookkeeping business? How did you then get started to shifting that into an entire very successful business that you now operate?
I followed my gift. I learned about, I was like a sponge. I probably spent about a year, and I was like a sponge. When the law of attraction entered my consciousness and entered my world, and I actually began to see how powerful it was, for a while, everything was amazing. It was like, it was so amazing. And then the wheels started to fall off. Then I was like, well, hang on a minute. How come the law of attraction worked when I did that, but then it doesn't work when I do that? And there were holes showing up around this thing called the law of attraction that everybody said was just so amazing and so great. But I knew there was something in it. I was just aware that there was a gap in my knowledge somewhere. And I was in the fortunate position to have clients and work with money, and obviously running my own business. So I could literally see within myself, my own business, and within like coaching a client over a period of say 3 to 6 months, a direct correlation between like what my clients were doing and how they were feeling and what was then happening in the bank account. Sometimes it would take a couple of hours for something new to show up. Sometimes it would take a couple of days, 3 days, sometimes like 5 or 6 weeks. I mean, I've got my own creational process down so consciously grounded as a reality now that I can map out. I know exactly how long it will take me if I stay on track to create something that I want.
How many steps are involved in your process.
How long's a piece of string? Really, it's like, so the process in and of itself, I mean, I do something called the 7 steps to extraordinary money alignment. There are 7 steps to that process. But actually, in terms of really learning to understand your creational process and open that gate, it's probably the first 4 steps are really all you need. So the first step is to stop ignoring your money. That is the first thing I tell my clients to do. The first thing we do is look at, okay, where are you ignoring your money? Because even if you're paying your bills on time and you're looking at your bank account, there's still going to be places you're ignoring your money. So you need to dig down into that and understand that. Because as I said right at the start, money resonates to 2 energies before you spend it. It resonates to responsibility and power. Looking at your money, dealing with your money, taking back control, not letting money boss you around, that is responsible. Mm-hmm. You are being responsible when you do those things. It is actually, it sounds harsh, but this is without judgment. Remember the law of polarity. The opposite of responsible is irresponsible. So therefore, if you're not looking at your money, you're actually being irresponsible. And remember as well, it also resonates to power. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with you now, but what I'll say is everybody's probably heard the phrase used, with great responsibility comes great power. They go hand in hand. So the first step is stop ignoring your money. Mm-hmm. The second step is to become aware of what you want money for. So money needs to be excited about coming to you. It's creational energy manifest at a physical level. It is how we create through the power of choice and consequence. Choice and consequence. When we make a choice, the energy underneath that choice will be reflected back with the consequence of that choice. There's always a consequence of a choice, always. And that's how we create. So money's creational energy manifests at a physical level, because when we got more money, we got more choices. It's as simple as that. So we need to know, what does, if we get more money, what are we going to do with it? Why should we align to having more money? You know, so how much do you want in what time frame? What are you going to spend it on is the next step. So getting excited about what you're going to spend it on. And then probably the last part of the process that is really important is knowing what I call your target energy. What is your target energy? And in order to know your target energy, you just need to take yourself down. I work with 3-month timelines because there's a vibrational shift available for everybody in a 3-month period of linear time. So if you took yourself down a 3-month timeline and what you wanted to create was already done, because actually it is, if it was already done, how does that feel? What's the energy underneath that intention? Because that intention is actually the consequence you want to create. And we create through the process of choice and consequence. So without knowing what the energy is underneath what you want, you're not in a position to know what choices you need to make, because your choices to get there need to be energetically congruent, because the universe can only say yes. So that's how it all works. And it's very simple when you get it. You're doing it already. Everybody that's listening right now in this wonderful moment in time, everybody is like the law of attraction, the law of polarity. It's all going on it's how you create. It's literally how you create your life. You are doing it already, but it's understanding it.
And what a beautiful way to sum up that piece there. And I've just written down those 4 steps. I'll pop those in the show notes actually. So the first one there was stop ignoring money. And it's quite interesting actually, Karen, because even up to we're on the 7th or 8th podcast episode at the moment. The first few podcasts that I recorded were exactly around these areas. You know, it's how do we get financially naked is my little phrase. How do we stop ignoring money? How do we start making money fun and exciting? And then actually step 2 that you talked about there, being aware of what you want money to create. And then step 3, getting excited about it. Often I find with money is that people don't think about goals, because you often associate goals with a very masculine energy. It's about, you know, having smart goals that are specific and measurable and achievable. And, you know, if I said to somebody, what's your money goals for the next 5 years that are smart and measurable and specific? And they look at me like, what? There's no emotion there. There's no excitement there. There's no concept of actually goals are, you know, it's best to start with goals, I believe, short term, as you said in your step 4, 3 months in the future, drawing out, what does that feel like? What does that look like? Actually, what are you already doing to get yourself to where you want to be in 3 months' time? And that's much easier, I think, for people to visualize and think about. What are you going to do in 3 months' time, as opposed to, well, you know, when do you want to retire? What are you going to do when you get your state pension at 67?
Absolutely. Yeah, like break it down. It's always great to have a yearly goal, a 5-yearly goal, especially as business owners.
Yeah.
Investors and all of that. Clearly we need that. But actually, we are creating every single day. And actually, the choices that you're making right now have created the consequence that you have right now. So you can even think to yourself, well, actually, I'm living in my past, because you kind of are. Today, what you have going on in your world right now, whatever that looks like, is a consequence of past choices that you've made energetically. The only way to change anything is to recognize where the misalignments are, realign to energetically aligned choices that match where you want to go. But how are you going to do that if you don't know where you want to go? And it's much better to work on a 3-month time frame, because it's energetically available. You can engage with it. It's not so far ahead that you can't even, don't want to think about retiring. It's not on my, you know, I can't engage with that, but I know what I want to do in 3 months' time, and I can get excited about that, and I can feel into it, and I do know what that looks like, and I can then reverse engineer that, both energetically and with actually, like, down to pound notes and pence, and what that looks like in terms of revenue and clients and profit and all of that stuff. That 3 months is far enough for my egoic mind not to get in the way and say you don't have time, but it's also close enough for me to engage energetically. And it also represents how long it takes to ground a vibrational shift.
Wonderful, wonderful. So as we finish off here, Karen, is there one thing that you could suggest that, for anybody listening to the show today, if they wanted to implement one thing today, or one thing they can think about or write down, what could that one thing be? So if they're feeling in that mindset of perhaps scarcity, and they're reflecting on their own messages that they grew up with money, would there be one thing that they could do right away to help to shift them into abundance?
Yes. One thing that they can do right now. It will require a little bit of discomfort, but magic happens outside the comfort zone, right? So it may well require that you go and look at your bank accounts, and so you should, because it's responsible, and that in and of itself is in alignment. But if you're able to listen to this podcast, you are in a position where you are at some sort of choice around money, because the service to actually be able to listen to this podcast is costing you money somewhere. Where even if you're in a coffee shop listening to someone else's Wi-Fi, you can't just sit in a coffee shop and rinse their Wi-Fi. You've got to buy a coffee. What I would suggest very, very strongly that everybody does is go off, look at what their weekly income is, and allocate just 1% of that weekly income, monthly income, whatever it is, allocate that to themselves, put it to one side, let it build up, and then in 3 months' time, go and spend that just on you, not on your business, not on members of your family, not on a bill that's just turned up, purely on you. And if you're in a position to know what your target energy is, if you can take yourself down that timeline in 3 months and how you're going to feel, I would strongly suggest that you take that accumulation of 1% and go and spend it on something that makes you feel like that.
Why 1%?
Because most people aren't doing anything like that at all. They're not putting money to one side for themselves. They might be saving for a rainy day, God forbid. They might be putting money away for retirement. They might be putting money away for certain things. But most people aren't just putting money aside for themselves. And actually, what we tend to do is put ourselves last. One of the most important things I go through with my clients are their money pots, making sure that their allocations of their money pots are in alignment. And the first money pot that you need to get set up is the money pot that pays you. Because you are the most important person in your life. You are the most important person in your business. When you spend money, you realign it from responsibility and power to the energy underneath whatever you're spending it on. Okay? When you're spending it on yourself, you are valuing yourself. You are saying, I matter. I'm the most important person.
Wonderful. I love that.
That's why.
And I completely agree with you, Karen. And I know for a lot of people who are in my Facebook community, we're talking a lot about how people can create these little pots of money. And having that soft play account or that treat fund for yourself is so important. And we don't do it. You're right. We always find other ways of spending our money that doesn't necessarily align to our own values. So that's a lovely tip. Thank you very much for sharing that. And just finally, what's your favourite Netflix program right now, Karen? Let's get to know you a little bit
right,
on a personal level here.
I thought about this, and I'm not actually sure that any of them are on Netflix, but I do love a bit of, I call it intelligent crime drama.
Oh, yeah.
So I love the likes of Morse and Lewis and Vera. I love
Luther?
a bit. Yes, I don't mind Luther. I love a bit of Vera. And actually, I've still got quite a soft spot for Poirot.
Who hasn't?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I enjoy spending my time. I'm more of a movie watcher, but I will binge watch that sort of thing. So yeah, that's what I do.
And have you got a favourite book?
Yeah, this was an interesting one. I wanted to think of a book that was has been very inspirational for me and still holds true. And I have to say, it was by a guy called Derek Rydell, who I don't expect any of you to have heard of. I might be wrong, but yeah, his name's Derek Rydell, and he was one of the first coaches I ever invested in. And it was a book called Emergence. And I still hold very strongly to the values in that book and how it broke down for me in such a language that I could really understand how powerful as human beings we actually are. And I do love that book. I've read it several times and I love that book.
Fabulous. I'll pop a link in the show notes to that book. It's not one I've come across actually, so that will be going on my wish list on Amazon shortly. So thank you so much, Karen, for being on the podcast today. I've learned so much, and I'm sure anybody listening to this episode has too. I think for me, the main aspects that have come out of this is around, law of attraction is not a woo-woo subject. This is something you don't have to be spiritual or religious to believe in this. This is about you having the choice and the control to be responsible with money.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that fear may come from experiences that you've had or messages that you've learned growing up with money, but you are in complete control of how you feel about money going forwards. And I think that's really important. Karen, if anybody wants to work with you or follow some of the work that you do, how can they get in contact with you?
The easiest place to get in contact with me is via Facebook. I've got, I don't have my own group or anything, but you can find me at Karen Baines, Conscious Karmic Creation Coach. Message me there. That's my business page. I love working privately with my clients, so I'll normally get people to connect with me there, and then we'll take the conversation over to voice messenger, and do it there. That really is the quickest, simplest and best place to find me. And on my business page, if you go and check that out, I do a lot of videos on there, and I talk about this stuff all the time, so that's a great place to contact me.
Fabulous. And again, I'll pop a link to your Facebook page in the show notes. Thanks very much for listening to the podcast today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. And if you have any comments or anything that you want to talk with me about, then please feel free to get in touch on email, which is hello@themoneypanel.co.uk. Alternatively, if you're not in my free Facebook group, then hop on over to the Money Panel on Facebook. You can see a link to that page in the show notes. And I also have a free community on Facebook in my group Financial Resilience for Women and Entrepreneurs. So I really hope that you got some teachings and learnings from that particular interview with Karen. What an amazing and fascinating lady she is. And it was really intriguing and interesting to understand about her 7-step system, and actually some of the main steps around the 4 aspects of, stop ignoring money and being aware of what you want money to create, getting excited about money and knowing your target energy, knowing where you want to be in 3 months' time, where you are right now and where you want to be in the future. And I've talked about some of these steps actually in some of my earlier podcast episodes. So if you haven't listened to those, then feel free to go back and listen to episodes 2, 3 and 4 on the In Her Financial Shoes podcast. And also, if you want to start exploring more around this topic, then I also offer a 3-month coaching program, which consists of 6 60-minute sessions done over Zoom, so done over video, where you can we can work together to explore your relationship with money and start making, saving and earning more money for you and for your business. And I use some really, really fun quizzes and tools that start that conversation, that can be really easy to start conversations also with partners and in relationships. Often that can be a challenge for people. And we will create a personalised action plan to help you start creating new belief systems, new habits, and implementing some practical money making and money saving plans for you. So if you're interested in working with me on my 3-month coaching program, then again, please feel free to get in touch. I offer a free discovery 20-minute phone call where we can talk about what that looks like and what you need some support with at the moment. Thank you again for listening to the show, and as ever, I would love you to pop a review on iTunes if you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.